after a few years pass, 10, 15 years pass, you begin to wonder, did it really happen that way? And was I just imagining it? But when I heard that that man ended his life in that way in our room, it brought everything back as clear as a bell. The house it's in a little a hamlet just outside of Kingston called Inverary, and it was pretty isolated. Their nearest neighbor was probably a mile away. Originally, the house was located across the road beside the barn, and it was on somewhat of a downgrade, and I'm assuming there was a lot of flooding, because what they did was they jacked the house up and they moved it over across the road from the barn, so it was on higher ground. And when we moved into the house, from the moment I stepped into it, and I know all my sisters felt the same, there just seemed to be a very negative presence in the house.
What do we leave behind when we die? Good deeds? The love of family and friends? But what if our legacy was abuse and hatred? Could a life of violence carry over into the next life? Could it take the form of an evil and threatening ghost? Hi, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today on Ghostly Encounters, we meet Sherry Haig. Sherry grew up in an isolated farmhouse in rural Ontario. She believes that a long-ago owner of the house abused his wife and daughters, and that after his death, he continued his cruel and misogynistic ways by tormenting Sherry and her sisters.
We had woods that surrounded 3 parts of our house, all across the back and up the left and right side, and we would see things moving around and hear things. You would see shadows that there's no way they could be animals. We had a swing set that was just outside the living room end of the house, so off sort of to the right and out by the trees. And I would be swinging in the swing set, and you'd feel it push me. And you'd feel the swing set trying to lift up out of the ground. It wasn't just pushing for me to swing, it was pushing me, like trying to push me off the swing. And it never deterred us from doing it. It's just that you had to do it in such a way that you would make it difficult for him to do anything to you while you were on there. And for me, I would face all of the woods and the trees and put my back out to the open yard. You knew he was there. You didn't have to see him. It was a feeling that you got. I never could see anything in particular. When I did see him, I knew he was there because I could see him clearly in the house.
The ghost Sherry says plagued her childhood also seemed to lurk in the farmhouse basement. There, it found another victim.
Oh, I hated going in that basement. I absolutely hated it. And we had a huge furnace. We used to call it the octopus. I mean, it was just had, fingers everywhere going to every part of the house for the heating. It was a scary place. It was very cold and very negative, and in the back corner of the basement was just not a very nice place to be. You just got this overwhelming sense all the time that there was somebody there waiting for you. My brother used to have, the duffel bags filled for boxing. And he would punch it every once in a while. You'd hear him down there. And I remember one time being in the living room, and I could hear him down there. And he bolted up out of that basement so fast. He was absolutely white when he got up, and he wouldn't tell us what happened. He wouldn't tell us what he saw. He never went into that basement again. He took his duffel bag and he hung it in the barn across the street. I think that my brother saw that man, the spirit in the basement. You wouldn't think that a spirit would be able to hurt you. I mean, you think that they wouldn't have anything, be able to grab onto anything tangible and hurt you with it. But I suspect if the spirit could have done that, he would have. He seemed to take a lot of enjoyment out of scaring us out of our wits all the time. He would bang things around and make noise. There would be sounds like big heavy footsteps banging down the stairs, and you'd get up and you'd turn on the light, and of course there would be nothing there, and you'd go back to what you were doing. But he did it constantly. It was a menace, and I don't think that he particularly liked us very much. I think maybe he felt like we were intruding in his space. I don't think I ever slept a full night in that house. I always woke up. He was always hovering over people's beds. And I can remember a lot of nights waking up and seeing him there. I don't think I ever slept a full night in that house. I always woke up. This particular night, I woke up and I saw this man standing at the foot of my sister's bed. And you could hear to me it sounded like a cackle. I mean, I never heard the thing make noise before, just banging stuff around, but I never actually heard it vocalized before. And he sort of turned in a way, and I could see him standing beside my sister's bed with this rope, and it was a hangman's noose. And I saw him standing beside my sister's bed, and I screamed. And my sister woke up, and he flew across the room, went through me, and went out the window behind me. So he went actually right through me. That was probably one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced in my entire life. Even now, I mean, I'll always remember it. I'll always remember that feeling. It was just dreadful. I don't think he realized that I got up. And I think that I was sort of like, as the crow flies, I was the direct line to the window where he would go out of all the time. And I don't think he saw me as anything to go around. I think he just decided to go through. I just remember it being very, very cold. It was like he was taking a piece of me with him. It was very strange. He was as plain to see as you are in terms of his outline and the rope and the hands. And I know it was a he. He never actually showed us his face. We never saw his face. He always had this sort of hooded persona. My mother called them nightmares. She said, "Oh, you're having a nightmare." But it's not possible for 4 children to see the same thing and all have the same nightmare. I mean, it's just not even possible. And my father would say that, there was nothing there, and he would turn on the lights and, check everything out and whatnot. And but it would be weird. I mean, the window would be open, and it wouldn't matter if it were, 40 below outside or 35 degrees in summer. The window would be open, and always that window. I think he just sort of went along with my mother, and he would just say, they're nightmares or whatever, and you're seeing things. And he thought it was, I think, because it was an old house, maybe he thought we had some preconceived notion of something being in there. My sister would sleepwalk at night. And I never actually believed that it was sleepwalking. I think that this man used to lure her out of bed And he seemed to favor her quite a bit when she was about, 12 or 13. He would visit her quite often in the night. I think girls who are menstrual or premenstrual have a lot of energy, and I just think that he was drawn to whatever energy that she happened to be giving off.
One night, Sherry and her sister were having a campout in the backyard, a lovely summer occasion for two young girls, but not this time.
Usually in the sleepovers, it would be in the summer, and we would be outside in the tent. So we were out there sleeping, and my sister woke up. She started to yell. And I woke up, and we looked out, and there was the hooded figure coming out the door. And standing between my sister and I and the man were three ladies. My sister started screaming, and I woke up, and we looked out, and there was the hooded figure. And standing between my sister and I and the man were three ladies. There was a taller lady in the middle and two younger women on either side of her that looked like they were probably her children. It's like they stood back and watched and were waiting for him to make his move. And my sister was absolutely hysterical. It was bad enough that we saw this man all the time, but now there were these three other women, and she ran. Left me out there, which is an ongoing joke between us now. The man disappeared. And the women disappeared as well. I don't know if this entity was, upset because he couldn't find my sister in the house that night, or me in the house that night. But I got the definite sense that they were not going to let him anywhere near us. I knew they were women. I just knew. You could see the outline of them. You couldn't get into any great detail or anything, but just sort of very old-fashioned silhouettes, I guess you could say. And they just seemed to have this light that came out of them. They never came in the house. They would always stay to the front of the house. There was a huge oak tree and some maple trees out there, and you'd see them, sort of drifting around out there. But I never felt scared around them because I just never got the sense that they were mean. In fact, I often sensed that they felt sorry for us. Like they knew what we were going through. We tried to find some history on the house when we were older, and we could never find anything, of course, because they moved the house. So all of the records and everything would have been at the old lot and concession.
Years later, long after her family had moved out, a now grown-up Sherry learned her old house was for sale. For a bit of fun, Sherry and her sister returned to their former home. Once there, they realized that the house was still no laughing matter.
My aunt was posing as the prospective buyer so that, when my sister and I were just going along to help her kind of thing. That's what we told this poor real estate agent. So we went out, and he met us there, and my aunt, we all went into the house, and it was so bizarre because nothing had changed in the house. It was like walking back in time. It was really weird. Anyway, my aunt was sort of busying the real estate agent in the living room, something to do with the fireplace, and my sister and I decided that we would go and look up in the bedroom. I don't know whether or not we were being suckers for punishment or what. So we went up there, and we went over to the window. So we were, reminiscing and doing all of this, and the door slammed shut. And we rushed over to the door, and we were both frantically, trying to get this door open. And it didn't appear to be stuck, in the jamb anywhere. We just couldn't get it open. We could hear banging around in the room, like thumping. There was no furnishings inside the house, and so we knew there was nothing there, but still you could hear this kind of banging around. We were thinking about, what are we going to do? Call down if they're inside the house, maybe the agent, and my aunt could come up and open it from the other way, because we didn't know why we couldn't get the door open. And it seemed like forever to me. And it just opened by itself. Just came open. We went down into the basement. And the octopus furnace, by the way, was still there, and still as bizarre looking as ever. I was standing in the corner, and my sister gasped, like, and I turned around, and you could see a rope hanging from the rafter. My sister was up the stairs and hit the basement door before I even turned around, because it scared her so badly. We said goodbye to the real estate agent, and when we were driving home, my aunt told us that there was a man and a woman and 2 children who had lived in the house for the past maybe 5 or 6 years, and they just recently moved out, and that's why they were selling the house, but that the man who had lived in the house had killed himself. He hung himself in our room. When I first heard it, I was just shocked. I don't know if you could call that a coincidence. Maybe it is. I don't think it is. I think that the figure that lived in that house probably had something to do with it. I mean, after a few years pass, 10, 15 years pass, you begin to wonder, did it really happen that way? And was I just imagining it or whatever? But when I heard that that man ended his life in that way in our room, it brought everything back as clear as a bell. I think that the spirit was very negative. I think he got a lot of joy out of life, and I think he took great delight in hurting other people. I think he was just malevolent and nasty and mean. I think he probably beat his wife and children. I think he probably hung himself in the house, or who's to say his wife didn't hang him? I don't know. I mean, if I had to live with something like that in real life, I'm sure the thought would be crossing my mind. It's a huge topic of conversation. You can't go through all of that for so many years and not have it be. We sit around and, trade stories all the time. But none of us look back at that particular time of living there with any great fondness. This entity, if I can give him credit for anything, is giving my sisters and I a collective consciousness in that we are all very close mentally to one another. We all have a heightened sense of psychic ability. That was about the positive that we could get out of it, and I think, you kind of have to look at it that way, or you'd be wallowing around in misery thinking about all the horrible things that, growing up terrified of something that you can't touch. It leaves you with this sense of you're not sure if you're seeing what you're seeing. I'm grateful that I have my sisters that I can sense when there's something wrong. I think that's a gift.
Literature and folklore is full of tales of hauntings by evil spirits. Sherry's story has many of the classic elements. There's the malevolent ghost of a former occupant trying to harm the current residents of the house. There's the disorientation of the location. The farmhouse is off-kilter, perched on a basement that is too small for it. But this applies to its psychic state as well as its physical one. Finally, there are the woods, filled with strange shadows and shifting shapes. Sherry believes the ghost may still be in the house. Maybe he's doing damage to the family that lives there now.
I think that that house had an energy in its walls. Well, you can't live in a house and breathe and be yourself and be a family and not leave some residual effect. So however many generations of families lived in that house, happy or sad, I think that their energy, is left there. There's an imprint left there in that house, in any house, but that one in particular.